So that is a brief opening remarks. We're going to get right into it with the Indigenous Growth Fund. Let's hear it from the Managing Director. Let's have a warm welcome for my man, Frank Richter, everybody. Frank, right here. Come on up. The stage is yours. Morning, Frank.
Good morning. Excited to be here. We've got a couple of things planned for you this morning. I'll give a bit of an overview of this year's annual report that we just published. A lot of you will have seen it in your bags, delegate bags that you picked up. I'll walk you through some of those results, and then we have a small panel moderated by my colleague Sarah McNeil and with Geraldine Marshall from NEDC. That's the IFI that we made our first investment in, and it's also the IFI that we are featuring in this year's annual report. And Leslie Jackson from Block Inc., our first private investor. Wrong button. We've got 5 investors in the fund in total. We've got Block Inc. as a private investor, and then we've got 3 Crown corporations, BDC, EDC, and FCC, and the Government of Canada are our investors at the moment. We are structured to take on additional private capital in the long run when the IFIs have enough demand for capital, so that will be something that's coming soon. And our goal is to provide long-term patient capital for the Indigenous Financial Institutions. Many of them are in the room this morning, and IFIs use that capital to grow their commercial lending portfolios. I have a slide here just to show how the flow of capital works for the Indigenous Growth Fund. It's a bit unique, and we get a lot of questions around it, so we always like to throw up this slide. Basically, the funds, the capital flows from the investors into the Indigenous Growth Fund, and then we have agreements with Indigenous Financial Institutions, which allows us to flow funds to them into their loan portfolios, and they then lend it on to Indigenous private and community-owned enterprises. So the Indigenous Growth Fund does not make loans to businesses directly. That's a question we often get. All the loans are made by the Indigenous Financial Institutions, and we rely on them and their knowledge as community-based lenders. They know far more than we ever could about the entrepreneurs and demands and needs in their regions. Maybe just looping back to the fund itself. The fund is structured as a limited partnership, and there is a general partner, IGF Inc., that is a subsidiary of NACA, and we will be putting out an open call for application for Indigenous independent directors later this May and into June. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be looking for 2 directors to add to that board, and we'll have more information for you on that soon. At the end of 2024, we had 8 commitments, and I'm showing them on this map here, to IFIs. So those are the IFIs that have agreements with IGF and where IGF Capital is at work now. As you see, the black dots, those are the IFIs that don't have agreements yet, and we are hoping to add more IFIs every single year, and we're confident in 2025 that by the end of 2025 you will see more of those dots being colored. The plan and intention was always that with the Indigenous Growth Fund being an open-ended evergreen fund, that it would take a number of years to bring a large number of IFIs on board. We knew that it would not all IFIs had demands right on day one for additional capital, but we are confident that the number of dots that are turning colorful will grow every year going forward. I think this year in particular, we have a new funding agreement, or NACA has a new funding agreement with Indigenous Services Canada. You heard about that yesterday, I'm sure. That is a 10-year funding agreement with substantial funding for both IFIs and entrepreneurs. This is non-repayable funding, and that funding will really complement well with the loan capital provided by the Indigenous Growth Fund. When we structured the IGF, the intention, the plan was always to have both the programming and the capital at the same time. The first few years, the program funding was a bit less stable, let's call it that. And now we have that stability, so we're really hoping that will add more IFIs quickly in the coming years. In terms of the dollar amounts, this graph has 3 lines on it. The top blue line shows how the commitments that IGF has made to IFIs have grown over time, and commitments stood at 84.3 million at the end of 2024. You can see that in late 2023, we had a really strong quarter for new commitments, and throughout 2024 have advanced a lot of funds against those commitments. The advances to IFIs, that's the green line that's steadily growing. And the other thing to note here is that the lines, the blue and the green, are fairly close together, which means we are actually advancing pretty quickly on the commitments we make. We always plan for a 2-year time frame for these commitments to be drawn down, but on average, so far we've seen those commitments being drawn down quite a bit faster. The pink line shows the loans outstanding in the portfolios of the IFIs, those portfolios that have IGF capital in them. And those have grown strongly in the early part of 2024, a bit of a slowdown later in the second half of 2024. That's something that we've observed. I think that's driven by some uncertainty, but based on even conversations I've had here over the last couple of days, we are quite confident that all those 3 lines will continue to grow in 2025. Now, taking a little bit of a different perspective here, this doesn't show the number of loans outstanding. It shows the cumulative loans that have been advanced with IGF capital since inception. So you can see that in 2024, we went from 163 loans at the end of 2023 to almost 400 loans that have now been funded with IGF capital. And a number of those loans are actually paid back at this point already because they're 3 years in. And those loans were worth $98 million. If you do some quick math, that means the average loan size would have been around $250,000, which is quite a bit higher already than the average loan size was across the IFI network before IGF was launched. And we've seen with each individual IFI as well that their average loan sizes are going up. And that was always an intention that we fund both smaller developmental loans, but also some more medium-sized loans up to even the $5 million mark in some cases. Quick look here at some of the impacts that this lending has had in the communities. This is based on some work that we've done with the Conference Board of Canada a couple of years ago, estimating, first of all, the GDP and labor income that's generated by these projects that are funded with IFI loans. And based on the businesses that were funded in 2024, $59 million of loans were dispersed by IFIs in that year. $126 million in labor income would have been generated from those projects, supporting close to 3,000 jobs, so quite a sizable impact. And that income and jobs then is estimated to have had follow-on broader socioeconomic impacts, such as 477 people moved from food insecurity, from having little food insecurity to high levels of food security, or 418 people having moved from poor housing suitability to very satisfying housing suitability. The math that the conference board here has done is based on a number of sources, including the Indigenous Peoples Survey, but I always find it quite interesting to see how the quite business lending type work that we do, how that actually translates into some broader socioeconomic impacts. To close things off, I thought I'd show some of the businesses that have been funded, the actual businesses, and also the industries that IGF Capital often supports. And I'll walk through the top 5 industries, and I'm taking a couple of examples from last year's annual report that we highlighted, where we had write-ups on Ravenstone Construction. Construction is a large share of most IFI's loan portfolio. That's something that we've seen for many years, a very typical industry that IFI's lend into. And another common industry that we see quite a bit is transportation and warehousing, with Tawasin Shuttles here as an example. Stephen Stark, the owner and founder of Tawasin Shuttles, took advantage of some contracting opportunities that came up when Tawasin First Nation became self-governing. So really interesting example of how bigger picture self-government agreements, for example, translate to business opportunities for entrepreneurs. And Stephen has now step by step expanded that business over the last years. In this year's report, we're featuring 3 businesses. I'm starting at the bottom here, healthcare and social assistance. We have got a dental care clinic, which is unique in that the clinic is owned by a dental hygienist, Ethel, and not by a dentist. So usually most of the clinics are owned by dentists, and then they bring in the hygienist. In this case, it's a hygienist owning the clinic, and she received a $400,000 loan for the building and some equipment. And then we're also featuring a restaurant off the hook with Lance and Vishal. Lance, the majority owner of that business. They now have 8 locations that they operate, and the latest loan is for a location in Qualicum Beach, a golf resort. And finally, Mariculture Limited Partnership with $1.5 million loan, a community-owned enterprise. And with that, I will close out. We'll play a little video here while the panel comes up on stage. I hope this was interesting. Thanks for listening, and I will ask Sarah, Geraldine, and Leslie to come up on stage.